Today, I want to talk about mindset and not the cliche of having a mindset that where you're just driven or you're always hustling, but the behavioral mindset of what it takes to be an actual entrepreneur where you're making decisions, you're taking action, and you're taking responsibility for your actions and for the outcomes of your actions. And the thing that came into my mind with this phrase, becoming an entrepreneur, because that's my journey. And even though I can say I'm an entrepreneur, it's a journey that will probably never end. And it's a shift from where I used to be to where I'm going, a massive behavioral shift. And that's what I want to talk about today. And the key theme in this is this phrase here, why asking for permission is wrong. And this is a behavior trait that I'm learning to erase from my mind, and I'm replacing it with something more empowering. So here's the story that I want to share with you guys. So here's why I'm writing this. Have you ever had this scenario happen to you? You have an idea and it's probably novel, it's new, maybe even creative, or you're just excited by it. You've had an inspiration and you just don't know what to do next. And it could be a product idea, or it could just be, I want to do this, I don't know how. And you don't know if it's possible. And if you're like me, the first thing that I will probably do is I'll get wound up about it and I'll start making some plans, but then I'll start doing some research about how to get it done. And I'll go do some research, and you always find answers like this. And so I had some unique questions about buying equipment for my business. So that's what kind of started this particular example. And I started going down the rabbit hole of, if I'm creating YouTube videos, I know I can use my business expenses to buy cameras and things like that. But I didn't know where the line was about what else you could do. So I started asking questions online, looking at forums and looking groups. And the type of answers I got were, talk to lawyers, you need good accountants, make sure to speak with experts. And then when it comes to like product ideas, you get questions like, hey, it's already being done. There's some like people who say, this is already exist. It's a kind of a way of saying, no, you can't do this because it's already being done. But there's just a lot of answers out there that basically are telling you a different version of no, or you don't have the decision rights or the authority to make this decision on your own. You need to go seek permission from somebody else before you do it. And I know that's not always the case, because if you get into entrepreneur groups, they'll give you different answers, but you still get a lot of like just gut reactions that are based off of, why would you do that? Or you better be careful, or you better go get somebody else to tell you it can be done. And I started thinking about, why do we accept those answers? And because we're trained to. And when I started a business, and this is about 5 years ago, I was still working at my previous company. So I did it on the side because I didn't want them to know I was starting a business. So it was for a variety of reasons. But I just wanted to keep it really separate from my professional work, from my entrepreneurial journey. And I started doing research. I got the typical answers of this, what you see in the right. Choose a business idea, and decide on your legal structure and choose a name. And I actually think this list here is actually pretty solid in terms of a step-by-step process, if you're kind of doing it in a logical, time-bound, linear format. But I didn't see any guidance out there where it was something like, hey, go identify a problem that you can solve, and then figure out how to charge money for solving that problem and collect money. And I think that process right there is super empowering, because that's the part that you really need to run a business. But most of our guidance comes in on this, do this planning first and do it according to the procedures and the policies that are expected when you're starting a business. And that's fine for creating the legal entity of a business. But when you're thinking about, how do I start a business that has value to other people and it actually will survive and make money, the real model is, how do you identify problems that you can solve, and how do you charge people and how do you get the money? And then once that happens, yeah, then you go start a business. But I didn't see examples about charging people to solve problems and collecting money. I saw all the stuff on this picture on the right. So it really started to kind of make me think. I didn't learn this actually until years into the process. I did this process on the right, which was, it worked. I had a business, and so I was prepared, but it was really more like, taking a course in college and getting an A on the paper, but all I had was this conceptual skills, and but I didn't really have street skills to get stuff done. I just had I had a right to have a business and a tax ID. So I didn't really do it by learning how to collect money. And I think this is a result of how I went through and became educated through our school system, especially in college. And I actually went to grad school. I know how to take a class, I know how to get an A, and I know how to show up for work at 8 o'clock and take a lunch and go to meetings and depart at 5. And I know that if I do the things described in my job, I'll get paid and I'll do well and I'll probably get promoted. And that's how I had lived my life up to about 4 years ago. That was my exact life, actually. And I knew how to do well at it. And so many of us do because it's laid out before us and we're told, here's what you need to do, here's how you need to do it, and here's what you'll get. And it's a really, for people like myself aspiring to be in those circles, it was a great way to behave, great way to perform. But it does get you into kind of a mindset of thinking because it becomes a safe way to live and operate and behave in your life. And at work, when you work for somebody else, if you have an idea, you go present your idea and it either gets denied or it might get approved and then implemented. But the company does the implementation or the team does it, or maybe you're granted the authority to go implement this idea. And that's a positive thing. But what happens is, when it gets implemented, the company does well, everybody's happy, you get a pat on the back, you might get a bonus or you might get a gift cards. But the thing is like, aside from reaching out to your boss, your supervisors, your managers, and saying, "Hey, I have an idea," you really take zero risk in the operation of the company. The company owners and the corporation itself, they bear the risk, the legal risk of what happens if it doesn't work or what happens if it's on the edge. And I'm thinking about like accounting or even like legal issues, like all these things, like they're always taking a risk and they're comfortable with that. But as an employee, we're usually shielded from that risk. And it's a really nice, safe place to be because you don't have to worry about those things because the company has lawyers, they have accountants, they have professionals to guide them and help them, but we're not always privy to those decisions and what goes on. And I think that's just, it's not a negative about corporate life is. It's just a result of what I observed, how I've been trained. I was shielded from all of these things. Even as an executive in a business, I when I became an executive for the company I worked for, I started to become more exposed to the risks. And at some point, you saw a lot, but I wasn't a shareholder. So there was a point where I never had the ultimate risk of if things go wrong or if they go right, you don't have the risk. So you don't have to think that way. It's an academic exercise. And, the result is this long-term training is we seek approval for new ideas before we implement them. And when you transition to being the owner of the company, you don't have that anymore. And this is I think for me, it's a really challenging mindset to get out of. And I think the other part is even as I transition to becoming an entrepreneur, this still happens. And I see this happening all the time in if you join a group, like a paid networking group, where you take a course and the courses follow these exact steps to get these results. What I realize is that they're not wrong. They have a good process to follow, but it's their process. It's not mine. And they got their results and they have a motivation and an interest for me to follow their method so I get results and they can claim that outcome as part of their service. So that's a win, actually. I think it's a really good business model. But I also realize that if you need to deviate from that process and you still go back and you're looking for help, you're not going to get the empowerment to say, go follow your own process. You often get the response back that, hey, you didn't follow this process right. That's why you're not getting the results. So you still get kind of put into a box if you depend on other people's trainings and courses to guide you and how to get results. And it's a trap that I fell into, and it sets me back because I have a lot of inspirations, I have a lot of insights that are good for my business. And I wasn't good at still sticking to my guns and saying, I want to do it my way, but I'm going to take the model that I'm learning from other people and implement them. I was trying to implement what they did. And then when I deviated, it was considered a distraction. And so I really got mad at myself because like I'm just getting distracted. But I had an intuition. I actually had evidence that part of my ideas were correct. And I just wouldn't follow through on them. And so what happens is when you get into that trap, you get a bunch of negative responses and you don't feel very productive. You don't feel like you're making good progress and you don't feel like you're an owner of your ideas and the outcomes. And I think that's the part that really started getting into my head is like, I need to take responsibility not only for my ideas and whether I decide to implement them, but also take ownership for just this is my business and I'm going to use other people's models for inspiration. But ultimately, it comes down to me. And that was a tough thing to get into my head. So this is what I'm doing actively. It's part of my daily process. But I'm moving away from this idea of I want to do X. Can this be done? This idea of can it be done? Is it okay? Or this type of phrase is a permission based or a consent based phrase. And I'm transitioning to this idea of what needs to be done in order to justify this. What do I need to do in order to accomplish this? And I need help to accomplish this. And this is a really powerful way for me if I need to talk to an accountant or if need to talk to even an attorney and say, here's what I plan to do. And I'll give you another example. In our family, my parents have a property out on the coast. They're elderly. They don't want to take care of it anymore. And in typical scenarios, they would probably put that property into a will and it would pass down to the family as they when they pass away. But we have a big family, 6 people. How do you pass a single property and divide it into 6 people? You can't. And so what I've been working on is turning that property into an actual corporation and working with lawyers to create an actual corporation out of it. So we put that the corporation becomes a property management corporation where the property is an asset within it and the family becomes actual shareholders in the corporation. It's been done before. There's a model for it. And instead of saying, can this be done? We went to the attorney and say, this is what we want to do. Is there precedence for it? How can we do this? What needs to be done? And we need your help. And we got all the answers we need and then then some. But it's a real deviation from traditional patterns because we're so used to doing things. If we're not in an entrepreneurial mindset, we aren't used to thinking about this is what I want to do. How do I get it done? We're used to saying, can this be done? And then we move on to, well, what would that look like? So that's an example of something that I've transitioned through in the last 6 months on a personal side. Now, here's something that I really kind of hit me over the head not too long ago. And I got this, I wish I could credit the person who gave me this idea. I saw it on TikTok. I have no idea who it is, but they're an entrepreneur and they probably got it from somebody else. So I'm not too worried about attribution. But it's a silly exercise, but it's really, really effective and powerful. And I call it the stop sign test, the red light test. And really don't do this as a kind of a risk taking exercise. Well, it is a risk taking exercise, but do it as a mental exercise for you, not I'm going to take a risk in the real world. So really only do this when there's no traffic and obviously no police cars around. But if you're at a red light, and you may have experienced this at night, or maybe it's just in a dead area, rural area, there's no traffic, or just something weird like that. But you're at a red light and there's nobody around, and you still wait for the light to turn green. And if you're wondering, like, why am I waiting like 2 minutes for this light to turn green when there's absolutely nobody here, or even 30 seconds? But the exercise is just run it, just do it. And then when you do it, like, think back, like, how does this feel? And I know in the past when I've done this, I'm like, oh, I'm breaking a rule. And it's an important rule too, because it's a safety rule. But when you do it in a zero risk environment, when there actually is no traffic, you still may walk away from that scenario like, oh, I just did something wrong. And I'm doing this exercise to rewire my brain to get away from that feeling of I'm doing something wrong and changing it to, okay, I'm making a decision and it may be against the policy. It's actually against the rules explicitly, but I'm okay with the outcome and I'm okay with the risk. And that little mind shift is a powerful one. And the reason I think this is such an effective exercise is because it is an explicit rule with real implications in the real world, but it's also symbolic because there are those scenarios where it makes absolutely no sense to stop. And I think when you kind of have that clash of ideals in your mind, you overcome that scenario where it becomes uncomfortable and you just get really comfortable with, okay, I know how that feels. I'm now uncomfortable with, I'm now more comfortable with making a decision that has an outcome that I want, and I'm in charge of that outcome, and I'm going to get there. And the outcome is I just want to get across the street faster, sooner than I would have had I waited. But it it kind of breaks some of the training that I've been through all of my life, through formal education and through corporate world, where you're just trained to get consent before you do something. So I think once you do this a couple of times, you really don't need to do it anymore. It's just a really good thing to kind of break your mind and your patterns. And what I'll end with is it puts me in a situation where I have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And instead of seeking consent and permission, the permission is granted from me. And it changes my patterns from thinking about how do I get consent so I can move forward, which is my old way, to now is okay, what's my goal? I want to do this. Where am I at today? And what's the outcome I want? And then I take action. And that is an actual cliche, of course, but this pattern of establishing what is my goal, where am I at now, and what do I want, and then taking the steps to get there is the real answer for moving forward and not asking for permission. And this has enabled me to do lots of things more quickly without this nagging doubt in the back of my mind of, is this allowed? Should I be doing this? And I'm trying to get rid of all those little voices in the head. And these exercises are helping me. And I hope some of this helps you today. I think what I've gone through in my formal education and working for 20 some years in corporate America, it's tough built in habits to break or change from. And I have to do it in order to actually survive as an entrepreneur because nobody is going to give me permission. Clients won't give me permission sometimes. They are actually waiting for me to be decisive in what I recommend should be done. And a lot of times we're just waiting for somebody to say, yes, it's okay, you can do this. And getting over that hurdle is a big step towards being responsible for the outcomes that, because you already are, but you have to be comfortable with being in that position.